How far? Chapter 5. Lawrence. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little cramped in my mom's old Envoy. It didn't help that Roberto was a literal jolly green giant and the back was too full with our provisions for anyone to be able to sit back there. It's kinda like a family vacation except that we were all grown adults and there was a lot more complaining. I mean, a lot. I had to put Roberto in the passenger seat so that the back seat wasn't so cramped, leaving Annabelle, Jake, and Becca to make it work. I can't count how many times I looked in the rearview mirror to see the two kids fighting because one of them was taking up too much arm space or they couldn't take the other's constant breathing. They were both only a few years younger than me, but it felt like I was a dad threatening to turn their car around if they didn't knock it off. I felt the worst for Becca though, since she had to try her best to ignore the constant bickering going on only literal centimeters from her face. Jake turned to Becca looking at her makeshift armor. So, how the hell did you make that stuff? Becca turned to him with a smirk and lifted up her arm. I was wondering when you'd ask about it. I already showed it to Valente up there, but I'll go through it again. Basically, you take some old magazines like you find in a waiting room or whatever and wrap them around a hoodie. Then you take some duct tape and I zoned out for the millionth time since we left home. Not that it wasn't interesting, but she already explained it to me a couple weeks ago when she first had the idea. I mean, it was pretty ingenious. It wasn't anything fancy and wouldn't last too long against a biter, but could buy you enough time to make it out alive, which could be the most valuable thing to someone living post-apocalypse. Hey Valente, why didn't you tell us about this before? We could have made some before we left. I looked at Jake through the rearview mirror and answered. I didn't say anything because we wouldn't have enough tape to make more than maybe one of those hoodies, not including the pants to go with it. We needed whatever tape we had left for repairs on the defenses. We shouldn't put all our eggs in one basket, you know? Jake didn't respond with words. Instead, he gave me a pouty lip. I really would have liked to make something like those, just as a special precaution, but there's no way that we'd be able to find enough supplies to make those for everyone. Unless we made a one-size-fits-all, which, in a zombie apocalypse, baggy clothes are just as deadly as presenting yourself to a horde with a big neon sign pointing to your brain. The trick is to be as streamlined as possible. Don't give them anything to grab onto. We even ended up shaving everyone's hair down to a length that you really couldn't grasp. All except Ocean, who was surprisingly more than happy to shave her head bald like Britney Spears after she had a mental breakdown. Sorry to break your focus, but the RX is coming up soon. According to your map here, we take this to another highway and just follow that straight into town. It should be a straight shot. Roberto held the map up so I could see what he was pointing at. I had made this drive a few times before to visit my brother, but I've always been directionally challenged, so it's nice to have the reassurance. Cool. Should only be another hour to 30 minutes before we get there. That is, as long as the highway stays this clear the rest of the way. Annabelle immediately jumped up from her seat and leaned into the front, shoving Jake into poor Becca for the millionth time.
Well, what the fuck? Why would you jinx us like that? Now there's gonna be a pileup or some other bullshit.
I cut her off before she could continue her rant. Okay. Sorry, I just meant that we've been lucky so far, but we need to keep our eyes open. There must have been a lot of people trying to get out of the city, and I guarantee you that most of them didn't make it too far. She slumped back in her seat and just stared out the window. The next 30 or 40 minutes went by without a single wrecked car on our path. Then right as we crowned a hill, we could see it. Roberto sat up in his seat, staring over the city. Mierda! A lot bigger than I thought it was. On the horizon, you could see several tall buildings with dark scorch marks across its entirety. See that there? I think that those were the dorm buildings for the college. I guess we can assume the infection hit here too. As we drew closer and closer to the city, it was eerily devoid of any infected. Jake leaned forward to get a better look out the window. I thought you said that there were tons of people here. Where are they? I lightly pushed him back to his seat with my right arm. I don't know. Sit down, keep quiet, keep your gun loaded. I'm serious this time. No messing around, got it? Jake saluted to me half mockingly. Sir, yes, sir. I brushed the comment off and kept scanning the streets. Roberto, which way do I go from here? I haven't been to this house before. I think my mom marked the directions on a piece of paper in the glove box. Roberto began rummaging through the glove box looking for the directions. Ah, here it is. I thought you said you visited your brother before. Without taking my eyes off the road, I answered. I have, but he moves like twice a year or something. It's hard to keep track of where he lived even before all this. He answered with a fair enough expression. He directed me around several streets before I slammed on the brakes. Roberto hit his head on the windshield, not hard enough to do any harm, but enough to piss him off a little bit. What the hell? What, is that what I think it is? We were both staring intently down the street. Jake, Annabelle, and Becca were all fighting to catch a glimpse of what had us so entranced and merited braking so hard that everyone had concussions. About 5 or so blocks down the street, you could see what looked like a military checkpoint. Concrete barricades, Humvees, soldiers, everything you'd expect. I could see that the soldiers at the checkpoint had obviously seen us or heard me screech to a halt in the middle of the road. They aimed their rifles at us, just staring us down. Any suggestions would be helpful, guys. Jake, you're a soldier, what do we do? Even without looking, I could tell that Jake was terrified. He may have gone through the training, but that means nothing when you're looking down the barrel of 10 to 15 rifles pointed at you. Jake, what do we do? He jumped as if he was just snapped out of a state of hypnosis. I'm not sure. I've never been in a situation like this before. I gripped the steering wheel hard. I thought back to the emergency procedure plans that we'd grabbed back at the National Guard Center. Guys, I don't think they're here to help us. In the emergency protocols, it said something under the infectious diseases that in the state of emergency, everyone needed to be quarantined, and if they resisted, the use of deadly force could be used at their discretion. Roberto turned to me frantically. But that could mean that maybe these guys don't think. Before he could even finish his sentence, a wave of bullets came hurtling towards us, hitting the engine block mostly, but a few coming through the windshield. Fuck! I slammed my foot on the gas pedal and flipped the SUV around, careening down a side street. I could tell everyone in the car was beginning to panic. Okay, just breathe, okay? Is anyone hit? They all took a moment away from their panic attacks to check themselves for any kind of wound. One by one, they called out all clear. Thank God. Okay, I'm gonna have to pull over, the engine's fucked. I could see from the corner of my eye that everyone in the car was frantically looking out the windows for any sign of the soldiers giving chase. Once I was pulled to the side of the street, we all got out quickly. Okay, everyone grab what you can from the back. I think there might be a duffel bag or two. Just take what you can carry. We need to get the fuck out of here. Everyone loaded up their backpacks as full of food and ammo as possible, leaving only a couple boxes of food and water behind. Roberto took both duffel bags full of supplies and slung them over his back like it was nothing. Let's go! I led them down the street to a large blue house with tall hedges covering most of the front portion of the house. We kicked the door in and cleared the house within only a few minutes. As we were setting our packs down in the front area of the house, Jake paced back and forth, obviously distressed. What the fuck was that? Why would they try to shoot us? What the hell's wrong with them? Annabelle ran up to him trying to console him.
Chill, Jake. Maybe they thought we were looters or something. They had to have a reason to shoot at us. I doubt they're gunning down every person they see.
He continued pacing back and forth. I can only imagine what was going through his head. Maybe he felt betrayed by what he so strongly believed in before all this. Maybe it was just the stress and adrenaline from getting shot at. Who knows? Next I saw Roberto slowly walk to him and pull something out of his jacket pocket. Here, take a drink. Jake looked at the flask in his hand and up to Roberto and snatched it out of his hand and took a large drink of its contents. He paced for maybe another minute or two before finally catching his breath and sitting on the floor against the wall. Hey, what's in that flask anyways? I could probably use some too right about now. Roberto pulled it back out with a smirk on his face. Tequila. Have at it, amigo. Normally I wasn't a tequila kind of guy, but right now I needed to calm the nerves a bit. I took a small drink from the flask and tossed it back to him. Becca came to sit next to me and Roberto on the couch as Annabelle kept lookout near the front window and Jake passed out in the corner of the room. So, do you guys have any ideas on what to do now? We don't have a car anymore, and I can almost promise you that those soldiers were probably looking for us. We sat there quietly for a moment before I answered. I don't know. I thought it would be bad here, but this is something else entirely. Becca and Roberto nodded in agreement. I say we wait till first light and head out. It's already getting dark out there, and there's no way we can move around an unfamiliar area in the night and not get lost or worse. Roberto stood up and started walking to the front window. I'll take first watch. You all get some rest. Annabelle walked over to the large recliner in the opposite corner of the room.
Thank God.
I didn't remember much after that as I fell asleep pretty quick. It was weird that after what had just happened I could sleep so easily. I think maybe something might be seriously wrong with how my brain rationalizes the world now. We just got shot at, and we're likely being hunted down by trained soldiers during a zombie apocalypse. But we're also sleepy. Good night. I woke up to an early morning sunrise shining in my eyes. I looked over to see Roberto standing in the same spot that he had been all night. "Why didn't you wake me up?" Roberto glanced at me. "I didn't want to bother you two." He smiled and gestured with his eyes next to me. I looked over to my right shoulder to see Becca sleeping on my shoulder. Somehow I didn't even notice. I reached my left hand over to her and gently shook her awake. "Hey, Becca, it's time to go." As she woke up, she looked up to me with her deep green eyes. "Oh, sorry, I must have fallen asleep and leaned on you in the middle of the night." We both sat up and rubbed our eyes. It's alright. I didn't even notice, to be honest. I could see that she blushed slightly. "So, where's everyone else? Are they already awake?" Roberto pointed to the next room. I peered through still slightly blurry morning eyes at Jake and Annabelle sitting at the kitchen table eating what looked like a bowl of Lucky Charms.
Well, goddamn, it's about time you two got up. I was about to come in there and beat you with my fucking shoe.
I grabbed Annabelle's bowl and took a handful of her cereal.
What the fuck? Go get your own.
I chuckled slightly and I gave her the finger guns, then proceeded to walk to my pile of gear and get ready to go. As we were all gearing up, Annabelle, Roberto, and Jake kept giving me and Becca little shit-eating grins. "What? What's wrong with you guys? Leave me alone." I could feel my cheeks beginning to blush, and then I glanced at Becca next to me, who was also blushing, and let out a small giggle. Okay, so the plan is to find a different route to my brother's house. We have to be careful, though. We don't want to run into any of those soldiers again. Once everyone was ready, we slowly and carefully left the house and made our way through several blocks of residential areas. Does this look right? I think we might be close. Roberto took the direction for me, trying to work out whether we were going to the right place. "Yeah, I think it's maybe a couple more blocks." I nodded and we continued down the street, moving slowly behind any cover that we could find. We were coming up to a large intersection and stopped about a half block before it. That's going to be a big space to run through with no cover, but after that it should be a straight shot to the house. I'll go check it out first and make sure that there isn't anyone in either direction. The rest of the group nodded simultaneously, and I started off to the intersection. I hugged the house to my right with my AR-15 in my hands, peering as far down to the street to my left as I could. I finally reached the corner of the house. I could see a decent way down the street across from me, but nothing behind me. I glanced at my group still sitting half a block away from me, and I proceeded to peek around the corner. Just as I did, a biter rounded the same corner as me, and we made the most awkward exchange of confused punching and gnashing you've ever seen. He had a hold of me by my arms, and I couldn't raise my rifle. Before I knew it, he knocked me off my feet and threw me to the ground. To my right, I could see everyone realizing what was happening and jumping to action. Directly past my feet, I could see a group of at least 20 infected turning to see what the commotion was. It was do or die time. It would only take a few seconds for the horde to realize what's happening and join the feast. I fought with everything that I had, but this fucker was just too strong. He grabbed my wrist and slowly opened my arms until my chest was fully exposed. His disgusting pus-filled eyeballs looked me up and down and reared its head back, charging for one hell of a bite. I clenched my eyes tight, gritting my teeth, waiting for the pain of this biter ripping my neck to shreds. Then suddenly Roberto slammed his makeshift bat into the side of his head. It felt like it had been minutes, when only a few seconds had passed. It was like time moved in slow motion. I pushed the biter's limp body off of me and looked up to my friends and family pulling the triggers of their firearms at the horde of the dead now less than 20 feet from us. I jumped up and aimed my rifle and began firing. "Fall back!" We were firing and moving backwards as fast as our bodies would let us. Collectively, we must have taken out at least 15 or so, but the remaining biters were closing in fast. I pulled out a machete that I had sheathed behind my back, preparing to take these fuckers on in a fair fight for once. I glanced to my left and saw that my group had the same thought as they pulled out knives or bats. The first of the biters hit Roberto first, knocking him off his feet and onto the pavement. Another lunged to Annabelle and Jake, which missed and subsequently was fucked up by the two bashing its brains in and slicing it to pieces. The two remaining biters that weren't currently pinning Roberto to the ground were coming directly to me and Becca. Get ready! The first lunged at me, but I just barely slipped out of the way for Becca to beat it with her bat similar to Roberto's. I glanced at him, struggling on the ground as they flailed their arms, beating him repeatedly and attempting to rip their teeth through the small makeshift armor. That's when the second biter slammed into my legs with an audible crack coming from my luck-infused femur. I screamed in pain as it rounded about for another charge. It pounced and perched itself on my chest as I sliced my machete deep through its collarbone where it stuck. I quickly looked back at Roberto in a similar situation, while I repeatedly tried pulling my machete free with little success. I couldn't see much, but I could hear the very distinct sound of teeth ripping through flesh as blood began spraying only a couple feet away from me. I looked back to the thrashing biter on top of me. Fuck you! And with that, it slammed my head against the pavement. Everything faded in and out of darkness. What little I could see was blurry and my hearing was muffled. Even through it all, I could hear more gunshots. I figured that Annabelle and Jake had finished off whatever biters were left, but I couldn't help but think that they sounded faint and distant, almost as if it wasn't coming from our group. That was all I remember before I completely blacked out. After that, I woke up and I was laying in my bed back home. I looked around for my knife and handgun that I always kept at my bedside, but they were nowhere to be found. I could see sunlight shining through my small window. That's not good. We blocked that window off. I turned around and sprinted up the stairs. As I opened the door to the stairs, I quickly glanced to my right to see my family all sitting at the table. My mom, Annabelle, Sam, Ocean, and Hunter all eating potatoes, eggs, bacon, and sausage. Ocean darted her eyes in my direction. You're late for Sunday breakfast, goddammit. We started without you. Confused, I cautiously made my way into the kitchen. Sunday breakfast? We haven't done Sunday breakfast since before the outbreak. Where are all the barricades? What's going on? They all looked up with a confused expression. My mom turned around to look at me. What do you mean? You must have had a weird dream or something. I made your eggs. They're on the counter. I turned to the kitchen counter with my plate of eggs sitting next to a pan of cooked potatoes on the stove. I looked around for a moment, and outside of the small window above the kitchen sink, I could see the dogs playing outside, frolicking in the baby pool and barking at each other. Huh. Okay. Then I turned around and grabbed my plate and a cup of coffee and sat at the table with everyone else. I grabbed a piece of bacon and sausage and scarfed it down. Oh my god, do you know how long it's been since I've had bacon? Months. Everyone at the table laughed and continued eating. As we ate, we talked about what was going on, how much we hated our jobs, what kind of house projects we wanted to do next, etc. When all of a sudden soldiers broke down the front door and biters broke through the back door at the same time. The soldiers began firing and the biters began thrashing wildly with my family caught in the crossfire. All I could do was watch as my family was either torn apart by bullets or teeth. I stood there with my back pressed against the wall, covered in my loved one's blood. That's when I woke up to a bucket of water being thrown on my face. Ugh! What the fuck? I could feel my blood pumping through the back of my head like the worst migraine I've ever had, and the same with my leg. It seemed that with every beat of my heart, I could feel every vein in my leg expand and contract. Hello, Mr. Valente, I suppose it is. I couldn't get your friends to give me a last name. I looked up at a man wearing some kind of military uniform. My vision still hadn't recovered enough for me to make out which branch. Who are you? Where are my friends? The man chuckled. Oh, there's plenty of time for all that. Believe me, we have nothing but time now. I'd like to dedicate this episode to a very special birthday girl. Happy birthday, baby. And thank everyone else for watching. Hope you liked the episode. I know it's been a while, but I've been kind of busy lately. So hopefully I can get another episode recorded here soon and get it out for you guys. Thank you.